question. It's a multifaceted question about how we can work out our relationship with Jesus and also about the biblical God Yahweh. So I'm just going to read a part of it and comment on that, and then the rest of the question. Hello, it says in the My Lives book, this is the book My Lives with Lucifer, Satan, Hitler and Jesus that I refer to sometimes, that Jesus realized the Jewish God requiring sacrifices is not the true God. So it means that Jesus himself went through a process of realizing this. So I'll comment on this first. Yes, Jesus is an ascended master today. The image that has been created by the Catholic religion that he is the only Son of God and was God from the very beginning is false. Jesus was a human being just like us. He had many incarnations, many lifetimes before the lifetime as Jesus. And as a result of this, he grew in awareness. He raised his awareness. So it took him a long time to reach the level of awareness where he could fulfill the mission as Jesus. So yes, he went through a process of growth over many lifetimes. So then the question goes on. David, one of the past lives of Jesus, is known to have engaged in conflicts such as with Goliath and other conflicts when he was king of Israel, which are why he did not ascend, right? So yeah, David was, according to the Summit Lighthouse, was a previous incarnation of Jesus, and he hadn't reached the level of consciousness where he could ascend, and that's why he embodied other times between David and Jesus, and he had to raise his consciousness until he was ready to ascend. Plus, I have a trauma with Jesus when he was David. He used to say Yahweh silently, and because the name is usually not said aloud in Jewish tradition, whilst David would say the name, other people in the temple would start screaming aloud so that the name was not heard by anyone. David also, I have no knowledge of this, David also believed in killing and had said to kill me when I was eager to hear that name of the false god. That must be the person referring to, I don't know. Can I ask Jesus to help heal that trauma? I do believe even Jesus has made karma in his own past lives. So yes, Jesus did make karma. King David wasn't perfect. And the fact of the matter is that most spiritual people have a trauma with Jesus. Not necessarily with Jesus personally in the sense that they were embodied with Jesus, even though some people obviously were, but more with what Jesus has come to represent as a result of Christianity being perverted. And as I've actually explained in my videos about Christianity, it's important for spiritual people to heal our trauma with Jesus. Partly because he is an important spiritual figure in the life of the planet, but also because he holds the spiritual office as the planetary Christ, and we all have to go through that office in order to ascend, and we can't really go through the office if we are still having some unresolved psychology relating to Jesus. So yes, you can definitely ask Jesus to do this. Jesus has dictated some books and a lot of teachings through me, which you can find on the website askrealjesus.com. askrealjesus.com. A lot of teachings there that are given by Jesus to help people heal their relationship with him. Because he, of course, very much realizes how much the official religion of Christianity has warped people's view of Jesus and of the Christ and what Jesus actually represented. As I've said before, Christianity destroyed Jesus as an example, but he was really meant to be an example that we can all follow. So it's very important to do this, and as I said, there's a lot of resources on that website that can help you do this. Now the question then goes on. I completely agree Yahweh is not the true God because I remember a past life with David, one of Jesus' own past lives, where I experienced trauma when David said Yahweh silently, and other people around me would start screaming so that name would not be heard. I realized Yahweh was attacking me back then, both through David and his followers, and some of those have reincarnated and have attacked me using black magic in my current lifetime. They are still following and worshipping Yahweh. Well, I obviously can't comment on the person's past lifetimes. That's beyond my knowledge and expertise. But regardless of what people want to project, when you look at the Old Testament God, if you did a psychological profile of the Old Testament God, you would say it's a pretty angry and vindictive character. And, you know, to me, what happened there was that you had this group of people in the Middle East who had a desire to be superior to the people around them, who had a desire to justify their actions in an ultimate way, and they used their own psychology to project this fictional God that had the same qualities that they had, angry, vindictive, wanting to have his way, and they used this to justify their actions. And this has created a false God. It's like I talk about in the collective consciousness. You can have these collective beasts that are created by people feeding their energy into it and their thought matrices into it. And this is what has happened to the Old Testament God. And this doesn't mean that there can't be some reality behind the outer myth, the outer specifics. You know, the name I am is a valid enough name because your I am presence is who you really are. And I am that I am. I mean, you can see in the interaction where Moses goes to the mountain to get the law, he asks, you know, God, the people are going to ask who you are and who sent me, so what should I tell them? And he says, I am that I am, which is really not a name. I mean, that's what translated in Hebrew becomes Yahweh or Yahweh, is really translated into English as I am that I am. But what God is really doing is he's refusing to give a name. He's saying, I am what I am. There are some that say that the real best translation would be, I will be who I will be. So in other words, God is refusing to give a name, a fixed name, or a fixed image. That's why it said, you shall have no other gods before me, and you shall not take unto yourself any graven image. Doesn't just mean a statue. It means you can't allow yourself to have a mental image of God, because God is always beyond any mental image. And this actually ties in with what I explained in my video about how the world was created, where we are in an unascended sphere, we are on an unnatural planet. And we have very limited abilities of our minds to grasp the reality that's beyond our sphere, the reality of the spiritual realm. So we really can't grasp who God is and what God is. Right? So you can say that embedded in the Old Testament myth are certain universal ideas that have validity, where you can say that God ultimately is something we cannot fathom with our minds. And if we try to create an image with our minds, we are breaking the first two commandments. And that's, of course, what the Jewish religion has done, what Islam has done, what Christianity has done. Everything in official Islam, Christianity, and Judaism is a violation of the first two commandments. Everything. But there is some reality there. There is a being that was our creator, but that creator is so beyond what we can fathom with our level of consciousness that it's better not to have any image of it. You can have an experience of the reality of the creator, but you try to put words and images on it and you've already lost it. Anyway, so the last part of the question, why did Elizabeth Clare Prophet refer to Yahweh as God when clearly Yahweh is not the true God of love? There are Christians who say Yahweh is not the God Jesus and the apostles worshipped, that Yahweh is a God of warfare and blood. Well, yes. Well, first of all, Elizabeth Clare Prophet, she was a messenger for the Ascended Masters for the Summit Lighthouse. And she talked about these things that I just said. There is some validity in the name, I am that I am. But it really is a name that is not specific. And she talked about it that way. She also was part of an older dispensation that was, and as a result of progressive revelation, the masters are now given teachings that are beyond this. But nevertheless, it doesn't mean that what she said was invalid. It was just what could be given at the time. And there are Christians who say that Yahweh is not the God Jesus and the apostle worshipped. That Yahweh is God of warfare and blood. Well, as I said, the Old Testament God, the image, the psychological profile of the Old Testament God is a God of warfare and blood and vengeance and anger. And that is the creation of man, where basically the fallen beings projected their own qualities onto God. But it doesn't mean that the word Yahweh itself, or I am that I am, doesn't have some validity to it. It's just that the Old Testament, of course, uses that name to justify the mental image that was created by humans, or by the fallen beings. So you see what I'm saying? There's a mixture there of something that has some validity to it and something that is a man-made image. So it's like you're taking a valid name and attaching it to a man-made concept to justify the concept. And that's, of course, typical manipulation of what the fallen beings are doing, where they are creating their own false images and trying to give them some ultimate authority. And we just have to come to a point where we use our Christ discernment to see through this and see that there's always a deeper understanding of everything. And especially when it comes to God, I can tell you, any understanding we could create here on earth, even based on the Ascended Master teachings, there's always more to it, always more to God than that. And there will be until we reach the greater consciousness. And even then the Creator will have moved on.